All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Incremental Innovation, How Small Changes Make a Big Impact. This webinar is being presented by the Alumni Association sponsor, Nerdery. My name is Marissa Smith, and I'm the Associate Vice President of Engagement at the Alumni Association, or as it's often referred to, UMAA. And the Alumni Association has been teaming up with Nerdery to help our alumni achieve important business goals. Nerdery is a premier digital product consultancy, and as a collection of strategists, designers, and technologists, Nerdery creates breakthrough digital products to help companies grow their revenue, outpace the market, and connect with their customers. Nerdery is headquartered right here in the Twin Cities with offices in Chicago and Phoenix, and has many, many university alumni and key leadership positions. It's been an absolute joy getting to know them. I've learned so much from them, and I know you're gonna enjoy today's presentation. And speaking of today's presentation, we have Kendal Kaminski, who's the Director of Strategy at Nerdery, and she'll help us understand where you fall on the innovation continuum. I'm really excited to learn more about this innovation continuum, different levels of innovation, and how organizations like yours can achieve innovation. One more thing before I turn it over to Kendal. This is a part of a series of skill building opportunities that the Alumni Association has in partnership with Nerdery. And so I wanted to make sure you knew about the others. We just had the first webinar back in March, how to get the most out of your data. It was an excellent conversation, and we have the recording available on our website. So we'll share that with you via the post webinar email, but you also have it linked here on your screen if you want to capture that now. And then we've got one more webinar coming up in May, May 17th, Beyond Project Management, how a product mentality is the key to building successful products. So I'm really looking forward to that one as well. So now I am going to turn things over to Kendal, and she'll kick off today's presentation in Incremental Innovation.
Great. Thank you, Marissa. Give me one moment to get my slides queued up. It's always fun, even when you work in technology. All right. Is everyone able to see the slides? Marissa, are we all set?
Yes, you look great.
Fantastic. All right. Hi, everyone. As Marissa said, I'm Kendal Kaminski. I'm the Director of Strategy here at Nerdery. So my team, I'm responsible for both our business consulting domain, which focuses on digital business strategy, as well as our product team. So everywhere from early stage strategy, the whole way through implementation and delivery. So BAs, product managers, strategists. I've worked in consulting across a whole range of industries. So I started my career in the federal health space before moving across travel and logistics, retail, CPG, transportation, hotels, automotive. I would say across all of those industries, I think there's one thing that I have found common, which is my favorite kinds of challenges to work with for our clients, the ones I find most compelling, is when I can help them find direction in the noise, figure out what makes sense for their unique combination of capabilities and aspirations. And then what I really love is rolling up our sleeves and actually getting started. So when you work with me, I'm the person that is going to send you a random link to an article, and I'll say, I know that this sounds totally unconnected to what we were talking about yesterday, but hear me out. I actually think it can apply, because I love finding those connections. And I think that that's what makes it so exciting to work with the folks that I get to work with across disciplines, and everyone's always bringing a different perspective. A little bit more about my background before we get into today. I hold a bachelor's of economics and a master's of policy management, both from Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. But last month, I had the opportunity to come to U of M to attend the Women's Leadership Conference at the Carlson School, along with a couple of my colleagues. And it was a fantastic event. So if you're considering attending next year, I would highly recommend it. So thanks to Marissa and her colleagues and the other teams for all the hard work that they do to put on events like this. All right, so today's topic, innovation imperative, how small changes make a big impact. So let's get into it. All right, today, let me talk about first what we're going to cover. So whether or not you work in digital product or tech, I think that there are some great lessons that you'll be able to take away and apply for whatever your field is. A lot of what I will talk about will be centered around digital product. That is what Nerdery does. And so when I present the case studies, we'll be focused on that. But I really think some of these lessons really do cross industries, fields, and different career paths as well. I'll start today by sharing Nerdery's definition of innovation. So I think that this is a word that's been thrown around so much that it's probably started to lose its meaning. So I will define that. And then we'll demystify the idea that innovation is only for organizations with deep pockets or tolerant managers. I'll share a few use cases or case studies with how my teams have been driving this type of innovation forward and driving impact across this innovation continuum that we'll talk about. And then lastly, I'll share some advice around how to start building a culture within your own organization that supports innovation. All right, so there's no one true path to innovation. And I think that that is ultimately what I'd like us all to keep in mind as we go through the content today. As I've said, it exists on a continuum, and I'll share that in a moment. It is continuous and it exists on a curve. So what was once a completely novel feature, if you think of your cell phone, think of the Touch ID that you use to log in. That was just wildly innovative when it came out. Imagine trying to keep track of all your passwords and log into everything. All of a sudden, your thumbprint on your phone, and all of a sudden you own the world. Well, eventually this has saturated the market. So pretty much every app you use is somehow integrated Touch ID into the login flow. So now something that was once considered innovation becomes table stakes. That's how it works. It's very cyclical. And so you're always looking for the next thing. Enter Face ID. So in the world of product, we talk about our end users actually obsessively and constantly. And when we are seeking to do something new and disruptive, we have to start with the needs of our users. So we also look at the competitive space. So what's going on around us? But then also we need to look at ourselves as an organization to understand what we can easily get started on and what's going to take a little bit more work to get going and would require greater investment based on what our capabilities are today and what we'd like to build in the future. So when we hold this narrow view of innovation and believe that unless we've created the next iPhone, we're not being innovative, we've already boxed ourselves out. So fear of innovation can really make us believe that if it is somehow different from long-term goals, or if it's going to take too long to address short-term needs, or it's going to be prohibitively expensive, we're not going to be playing the game. And so let's take a little step into what innovation is. So how we define innovation at Nerdery is the process of creating something new, optimizing something to meet, exceed, or anticipate future user needs in a way that hasn't been done before. I'll put an asterisk next to that doesn't exist on my screen and say hasn't been done before in your market or among your competition. And we'll talk about the different types of innovation and I think why that little subtext matters and the characteristics or some words that you can kind of think of to remember what each one of these terms means. So whether your effort falls, I would say where your effort falls depends on the type of problem you're trying to solve, what your own digital maturity is for your organization, as well as the digital maturity of your industry. As well as your organization's ability to scale and support innovation efforts. So this is where change management for digital innovation and digital transformation is absolutely critical. The first part of this continuum is core innovation. Some words to keep in mind, and we'll unpack these definitions a lot more as we go. Incremental, sustaining, continuous, adaptive. It's not so much about the size or duration of implementation for something that falls into that core innovation category, but it's rather how it is perceived and received by the market. Now, when we look at new product innovation, we're thinking that this is adjacent to your core business. This is somehow disruptive and again, new. And transformational innovation, this is when we're starting to talk about something that is radical, that is a breakthrough idea. So before we start talking about how at Nerdery, we bring innovation into the digital marketplace, I want to talk through some of the barriers that you might encounter on your innovation journey. I would say that a lot of these, as I've been thinking about this, are the challenges that we see in the digital product space where Nerdery works, but I actually think that there are takeaways, again, for all industries. So let's talk about some of the barriers to innovation. All right, lack of organizational alignment. honestly, you've failed before you've started if you can't get organizational alignment. It's easier said than done, but I really believe that this alignment starts with understanding not only what you are trying to gain buy-in for, but who the people are that you need that buy-in from. Ultimately, organizations are run by people and decisions are made by people. So what motivates that person? What information do they need to make a decision? What are the goals or objectives or metrics that they are responsible for? And how could this initiative that you're trying to propose contribute to that? You also have to think about how they think. So are they visual? This is where pictures really help. We often create prototypes to explain an idea, get people excited and on board, and really start to picture what this could look like in the hands of a user. Are your stakeholders data-driven? Then let's focus on the KPIs and the metrics that you hope to impact with what you're proposing. And if they're financial decision makers, consider building a business case. This is something that we always go back to at Nerdery that really includes that financial model to help estimate the opportunity. All right, the next barrier I want to address is siloed ideation. So this happens to me a lot. Have you ever walked into a meeting and you think to yourself, was I or was I not just in this same group of people in a different meeting, but it's all the same folks in this one yet again? So this is really what creates a culture that has siloed ideation, intentional or not. So when you're bringing the same people together again and again to talk through the same issues and solve problems, and then you sit back and wonder why you're not coming up with something new, well, that's siloed ideation. One of my favorite quotes comes from Albert Einstein, and it's this: we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking that we used when we created them. So break down these barriers by opening in the doors and bringing in people across the business who have different views. And I promise you'll be genuinely surprised when you put together a diverse group of people in terms of background, expertise, skill set, seniority, and then see what they come up with. Don't stifle your ideation by accidentally siloing your team. So this brings me to the next barrier, which is decision-making without data and insights. So do your research before any type of session where you want to come up with ideas and come with inspiration from market trends. So reach beyond your industry. If you remember in the beginning, I'm the person who always is looking at that random article or that random thought piece and sharing it. And folks are saying, Kendal, we're in transportation logistics. Why are you showing me something that's happening in healthcare? It's because when you start to think outside of that box that you might consider your industry to be stuck in, these random things or seemingly random things become those questions of what if we did it this way? How would that actually change this experience for our users? So when you think about this, every single user that is using your site or your app or any product, physical or digital, is also turning around and using something else. So they're closing your app and they're navigating to Fitbit, or they're going on to Amazon and they're placing an order. Maybe they have a subscription. And they're being rewired and trained constantly by these experiences. So talk to the users that you do have and find out what's working and what's not. And talk to the users that you want but don't yet have to find out where those opportunities are to bring them over. I think there's one thing my team always comes back to is where there is frustration from a user, there is an opportunity. So whether we're talking end customer users or even business users who are responsible for using this digital product to do their work or to serve the end customer, if there's frustration, there's always an opportunity. So let's talk about this last barrier to innovation: executing an idea without testing it. If you've done the research and you've workshopped and you've ideated, you've created this compelling argument, maybe you have a business case and you've gotten all the right people that you need in your org behind it, and you just cannot wait to get this idea out to every single one of your customers, hold on and take a breath. There's a fallacy. We tend to fall in love with our own ideas and we assume that the solution that we've created is the solution to solve the problem. And it is absolutely it. In economics, we talk about sunk cost bias, and really, I would say continuing to invest in an idea without testing it can be a very costly mistake when we go all in and we push something out to the whole market without validating it. So I could probably spend the rest of our time today barely scratching the surface on testing techniques, but I'll run through just a couple high level things. So just as long as you're testing and you can figure out the right method, and Nerdery customizes approaches with the clients that we work, because it's not always cookie cutter as to what makes sense. But sometimes it can be pictures, screens, images, something clickable. Sometimes we don't have screens yet. We're going to run a survey. We're going to talk about features, and we're going to ask folks to prioritize what matters to them. As a strategist, my team, we are best when we work with our partners across insights, and they'll equip our team with these tested concepts so that we can make the best recommendations possible and prioritize things that we want to put forward in any release or any product that we're creating that actually maps back to user needs, pain points, and also provides a unique value proposition. So testing this before scaling is absolutely critical. So you can find a representative sample of users before you test. You can talk to a focus group. Sometimes we use A/B testing. So the list goes on. But keep in mind that innovation is not reckless. There's like a lot of power in the confidence of a market tested idea before you truly launch and go out. All right, so let's jump back into core innovation and talk a little deeper on that. So this is really, I would say, the entry point for innovation, and it is actually the most attainable. So we're focused here on improving existing capabilities. Doesn't mean you're not going to tweak things, but if you are mature and you're continuously iterating on your products or services for your customers, and you know what your user needs and problems are, then you're probably able to continuously continue innovating to solve these problems. So we're specific about iterating on features. We're not overhauling an entire experience or an entire journey for the sake of it, but maybe we're focused on optimizing certain parts, certain pain points that maybe it wasn't a pain point when we launched this product 2 years ago in the market, but conditions have changed. User needs have changed. So it's about that incremental innovation, that core innovation as we go. Before we jump into a case study, I want you to think about your favorite streaming service. Maybe you have two. A feature like simultaneous viewing with multiple households. I think that's a great example of core innovation. So it's building on what already exists. You already probably subscribed when this feature came out, and there is a streaming service available. And it delivers on something that the user desires. So to be alone in the comfort of your own home, but also watching and reacting, let's say, to The Mandalorian at the same time as your friends who are part of your group watch party. I'm going to step now into a case study for a client that we worked with through core innovation, where we were solving a distinct problem for a life sciences organization. So at the height of the pandemic, when demand for this org's products were absolutely surging, the e-commerce platform was experiencing high rates of cart abandonment. And so for this product team, this indicated poor customer experience and frankly, lost revenue for the business. So Nerdery was already engaged doing some other work, and they were brought over to this team to help engage and use user-centered design processes to identify a new and easy-to-use e-commerce platform that would take cues from other major commercial retailers. So this redesign improved the overall customer experience and the purchase workflow by reducing the critical friction points that customers were experiencing. So we introduced some features such as improved mobile capabilities, improved website performance that was more on the back end, but also on the front end, we were focusing on features such as product reviews, more accurate pricing and availability information in real time, which is huge. Imagine you go to order something, you add it to your cart, you find out it's not available or it'll get there in 3 weeks. You walk away from the cart, or let's say click away from the cart, and you're going to go find that product for someone who can deliver it on time. So improving that experience, as well as some value add features such as shared order lists for multiple orders. Let's say you work at a lab and you have one buyer, but a lot of people have needs. So a shared list where everyone can kind of collaborate on that order list and produce one order rather than a bunch of random carts that are being abandoned by people, because then you maybe slacked or emailed your actual order to the buyer. So keeping everyone on the site to make those decisions and kind of keeping everyone in that purchase funnel. as well as the self-service on the order status and tracking. In addition to the cart abandonment rates, there were some issues around, like I think a lot of organizations, just high call volume, particularly during the pandemic. Where's my order? Things are, running late. And so this self-service on order status, as well as the tracking of the order, was really able to reduce that call volume as well. So through these experience changes rolled out across, again, this is a global e-commerce platform, so big numbers at play here. This contributed to 22% growth in e-commerce sales, amounting to $1.4 billion in revenue increase. So really incredible. All right, so now let's step into new product innovation. So I would say this is probably a very common or public type of innovation. So this is what I would say is visible to the public when a new product is launched by a company that is drawing on its existing capabilities for new uses. So in order to do this, you need fresh proprietary insights that are specific to your existing customer needs, but applied in a new way. You're looking at demand trends. So are they leaving your platform or your experience to go find something somewhere else? And there's an opportunity to kind of keep them in your ecosystem. You need to look at the market structure. So what else is already out there? What are the competitive dynamics at play? So, has someone else, another competitor, launched something recently? Is there, truly a white space? As well as technology or technical capabilities. So is this something that requires a new investment in a new set of technical capabilities to execute, or is it an extension of something that is existing? This can introduce a new business model entirely or a new source of revenue, but that's not always required. So don't always think new product, a completely new way of doing business. It can be a new experience that kind of funnels into your existing business model as well. So if we go back to our streaming example, when Disney Plus launched in 2019, it was frankly a little late to the streaming game. So Disney content had been on other platforms, such as Netflix for years, frankly, at that point, and Disney had an ownership stake in Hulu. But bringing their own streaming service to fruition, to me, is the definition of a new product being launched. So they already had existing strengths and capabilities and had, as we know, based on what Disney is, had their own content creation capabilities that other streaming services were actually actively trying to develop. Of course, we live in the golden age of television now, and there's more TV out there than you could possibly stream. In the next 100 years, frankly, you couldn't get through all of it. But as Disney realized that there was a demand for their own content, they could actually cut out the middleman, and they could produce and really give an avenue for their subscribers or customers to access this Disney content through their owned platform. So leveraging and building upon their existing capabilities, they were able to launch Disney Plus. And I would say, going back to our core product innovation example, they've continued to iterate on the platform with different features, different models around ad supporting versus a non-ad option as well. So if we go back into a client case, we're actually going to step for a moment now into transportation and logistics. So we had a client who wanted to create a digital marketplace in order to increase their market share in a particular part of their business. So this new product was created to digitize communication gaps between drivers who had truck capacity and customers who needed to ship items. Now, these marketplace or matching marketplace apps actually already existed with some of our clients' competitors for a particular type of cargo or loads. I'll use the word loads here. There were some third-party aggregators. There were also direct owned loads. That kind of depends where the contract sits. So this app would not actually be the first of its kind in transportation logistics, but where our client was hypothesizing was that there was a need for new product innovation for a very particular segment of their market where they actually happen to have a great deal of market share. So if you thought you were going to learn a little bit about the trucking industry today, then you came to the right place. So I'm going to tell you what open deck independent carriers are. So open deck, imagine Well, it's really easy to think about the kind of tractor trailer you see on the road, and you have no idea what's inside, and that truck is going by, and that is closed deck. Usually that's considered more typical freight. There are a lot of apps out there that actually serve that part of the market, and drivers don't all work for big companies. Some of them are independent, small business owners, and they are getting a hold of those loads. They're meeting a contract and they are on their way. When we talk about open deck, we are talking about those trucks or carriers who have both the license and the certificates required and the equipment to transport these big, hard to move items. Think about the parts of a wind turbine, or when you see a bunch of telephone poles being moved down the road on an extra long tractor trailer with a police escort, that type of thing. So it's a very specific type of customer with a specific type of truck. And at the time, that load matching was happening through repetitive phone calls to uncover available loads and requirements and timing. So when can you be here? We have this wind turbine up in Seattle that needs to be moved by Thursday. Well, this individual's in Missouri. How are they going to get there? Can they time and forecast that? So there's a lot of back and forth. And then of course there's pricing. So what is a fair price to move this load? Negotiations would happen. And what I learned that there were a lot of fax machines involved to actually sign contracts and go back and forth. So we worked with this client to first understand voice of the customer. How is this work happening today? To really understand and put a process around it, and then find out what was the most frustrating part. Personally, for me, having to use a fax machine while I was driving would be incredibly frustrating and potentially dangerous. So this would, of course, taking what is frustrating and then figuring out where the opportunities are. This would influence which features we would later prioritize for the first release of this product. So ultimately, we scoped a product that would include the ability to search and book loads, update your progress while in transit, communicate back to headquarters in real time, and then receive all payments for delivered loads completely digitally, no fax machines required. And in the first year, this app has increased their market share of open deck loads by 30%, and our client expects to see $230 million in revenue transacted through this app by the end of the first year. So that was really exciting. So new product completely for this section or segment of the business, as well as I think a new opportunity for our client to actually release their first native mobile app that they now own. And they are actually looking to build out a bigger ecosystem of digital products as well for the different parts of the market that they serve. So very exciting. All right, so our third type of innovation is probably the one that you thought about when you entered or signed up for this webinar. So this is the big thing that enters from left field, takes all the market share. There's no more Blockbuster. It creates its own competitive landscape in its wake. So in transformational innovation, an organization not only launches a new product, but an entirely new business model as well with it. So this is high risk. It can be high reward as well. So let's talk about a client that Nerdery recently worked with. But before I go to my next slide, I'm going to explain what something called a card break is. And you're learning about all sorts of things you maybe didn't know about before today. So a sports card breaker, breaks, as they're called in the industry, are when a single person or a business buys an entire box of sports cards. And then they charge individual collectors for the opportunity to buy in and keep a selection of cards from that box. So then it's typically done via a live stream. The breaker or the person who bought that box opens the box, shows what cards are inside. And then after the box has been opened, the breaker will send out the cards to the boxes of the investors, the people who have invested into that break. Okay, so we'll talk through an example. Let's say you buy in on an NBA box break, and there are specific year ranges and all sorts of stuff that are going to dictate the price. These can go from hundreds of dollars into the honestly high thousands, depending on how rare they are, the year, all of that. So let's say you and 29 other people have bought in, and you have chosen the Minnesota Timberwolves as your NBA team for this break. So you and the other folks, usually there is one person that has joined the break, so one seat per team that potentially could be in that box. You all watch the live stream together, and the breaker opens this box of cards. And let's say in that pack of cards, there's like 2 Timberwolves cards, 1 Golden State, 3 Chicago Bulls, the list goes on. And so those who are on a team that didn't have a card, because you're not guaranteed, will ultimately get nothing. And then if you had actually signed up for a team that did have a card, you go ahead, you pay, finish the transaction, and then your card is shipped to you. So depending on the specifications of the break, again, if it's like a really rare potential set, you're gonna have folks attending to watch the event that don't even have a stake in the game. They're just interested in seeing what's going to happen. So what does this have to do with transformational innovation? So in this field, our client has been successfully moderating card breaks using Facebook Live to stream his events and doing everything else on the back end on his own. And he nearly has 20,000 users that just were part of his group. There are a lot of competitors in this space, but our client had the idea to build out his own e-commerce platform to be able to control the full card break experience and grow into this leading card enthusiast platform that can continue to scale and evolve and be used in, honestly, so many different ways outside of just a card break. When you own the platform, you can decide how it can be used. So we partnered with this individual, Real Sports Cards, and in 8 weeks, our team went from an initial idea and frankly, a tested concept, which we'll talk about in a moment, the value of that, in order to put together a concept and a prototype and move quickly into development. So we started by aligning on what is the vision for this. We understood how it was being used today, but like, what are you truly marching towards in the future, as well as setting objectives and metrics or key results that would help drive our measures of success upon that first release and the first launch. We also facilitated a series of cross-functional brainstorming sessions to fuel design, and we'll talk a little bit about the structure of what makes, I would say, a great brainstorming session, sort of the anatomy of that to drive innovation. And earlier this year, actually, just a couple months ago, this app was launched into the market, and this platform has continued to gain users. So he's scaled beyond his original user base and has provided a backbone for a scalable business that our client is able to now efficiently prep for these events. He's able to do more events, and then revenue has already set and exceeded the targets that he had set, knowing that there might be some attrition as he migrated, but it has already exceeded those targets, and we are super excited for what's next. So transformational innovation, something that didn't exist, that we've now created. And I think from what we've heard, there are a lot of eyes in the hobbyist industry that are paying attention to this and looking at applications beyond sports cards. All right, so let's talk about where you might be today. Maybe you feel ready to push an idea forward that you've had for a while. Maybe I talked through some examples and you're still not quite sure how to get started. And maybe you have a couple of ideas that kind of scatter across that continuum that you want to push forward, and you really don't know how to prioritize your ask. I've talked a lot about digital maturity, or we at least have touched on that, and that has a big part of how an organization is able to evaluate these types of ideas and push them forward. So we're going to actually pause, Marissa, if you could set up the poll. We're going to do a quick poll just to get a pulse check of those of you on the call, how digitally mature your company might be today. All right, we got some votes coming in. All right, here we go. So if I hit share results, I'm hoping everyone's able to see them. So where did we land with this? So how is your organization investing in innovation based on the continuum? I'm sorry, I gave the wrong prompt. Luckily, you're all smart and you saw that. All right, so 20%, a decent chunk core innovation, some on that new product, transformational, all three. I think that's great. And not sure. And a few folks said we're not. and that's okay. I think that this is great, and I think it goes to show that it just kind of depends. I know folks that have joined today are from a variety of industries, so I have lots more questions for you all if we were to get some one-on-one time, but that's great. Thank you for playing. All right, so let's actually step into what it takes to invest across that continuum that we were talking about. So at Nerdery, we have a long-standing relationship with Google Cloud as their digital product team supporting their annual Next event. So in 2020, like many people, the Next team had to quickly figure out how to pivot from an entirely in-person event to a completely virtual experience. The product that we had initially created previously was really not a virtual event platform. It was sort of an augmented site experience for people who were attending a conference in person. But all of a sudden, we had to figure out really how to pivot this platform to a fully virtual experience. And we managed to do this while also increasing the number of attendees. Maybe the barrier to travel being reduced, maybe it's a great experience. So we have continued to collaborate with Next. So that was really that new product innovation on top of that. But as the event has returned to this hybrid experience, so previously all in person, then it went all virtual. Now we are blended in 2023. And we've continued to invest in core innovation around features such as first 24-hour live hosted stream, there's chat support, and other features that really knit together the virtual and physical experience to create a really engaging experience where if you're a virtual attendee, you don't feel like you're sitting there watching something happen. You are truly immersed and you are part of it. 250,000 annual attendees, that was in 2022, and we are hoping to increase that going forward. We already had a very high user rate for this site, but as the features and functionality have shifted, notifications and sort of personalized content, this hybrid product has really evolved to become a core part of that overall Next event. All right, so we are going to talk a little bit now about how to make innovation possible. All right, the first piece of advice I have is define your innovation charter. Again, I'm talking in terms of digital product, but I think that there are takeaways here across industry, and hopefully you find something in my list of 4 I'm about to share that really resonates and you can take away and, I don't know, get going this week. So if you don't already have vision, goals, objectives, how you're going to measure this defined, I think that is a fantastic place to start. So before you start going into tactics, you have to have a place to align everyone. What are you trying to do? What is the vision? Where are you trying to go? The objectives, really that's going to measure your success as you get there with the key results that align to those objectives. And then the tactics are going to be centered and help you identify, okay, are we really doing core innovation here? Is this a transformational idea? And honestly, take that innovation charter and tie it back to what your overall organizational vision or mission is, and tie that back to that broader strategic plan. And when you can find that there is alignment, I think you'll find that folks are willing to listen and their ears are open, because everyone's looking for ways to achieve broad organizational goals that have been set. My next piece of advice is strive for cross-functional organization-wide innovation teams. So the best ideas, as I've mentioned before, come from diverse teams and should include everyone's ideas. So don't pull the same people that you talk to all day. Look for someone who maybe is a little quieter. Try to create a opportunity to not just all get together in the room and shout out your ideas, but use a couple of different techniques to really pull those ideas out from people in that cross-functional team. Some people like to write, some people like to talk, some people like to draw. So I think there are a lot of different techniques that we use when workshopping with our clients to make sure that all voices are heard, whether that's through writing or through speaking. My next piece of advice is to balance innovation efforts across that spectrum. It looked like 25% of you that responded to the poll actually said your firms are investing across that spectrum, which I think is great to hear. And so you can allow different initiatives to take shape over time, and they're all going to have different time horizons and a different amount of time to really recognize the intended return of investment or hopeful return of investment. So I think that this is a great way to balance things so that resources are well spent. You don't have one team solely focused on something for a really long time while you're kind of leaving opportunities sitting out there in the market. It also helps to keep org expectations realistic, to not put all of your eggs in one basket. My fourth piece of advice is ensure action after ideation. So don't just explore and refine these ideas, but never act on them. We like to use virtual whiteboards a lot at Nerdery. And so I just say, make sure it doesn't just stay on the Miro board. That means that you might need to assign an executive sponsor. Hey, we have this idea. Can we have your sponsorship to go after this? You want someone that is going to challenge you, that's going to bring room for healthy debate, maybe improvements, add on it, or really help you figure out what resources you need to bring your idea into reality. I think a big thing to also think about is that a lot of people who really thrive in innovation settings, and this is a blanket statement, maybe aren't the same folks who thrive in creating a project plan and actually seeing it through. Maybe I'm one of them, and I'm always grateful for the project managers that I work with at Nerdery, because ultimately innovation becomes a project management challenge, and you have to move forward and have ownership over the exact to-dos and the deadlines to keep moving things forward and drive a plan. So I think that this process is hard work, but it's necessary, not just to dream, but to also launch your idea, because that's also where that satisfaction comes from, is getting it into the hands of the users. So ideas will stay in that room without someone to drive them forward. So partner with the right folks and get that cross-functional team in place so that you can drive things forward effectively. All right, I lied. I said there were 4 things. There's a 5th one. So make a plan to test and measure. We have a saying, value exists in the hands of the user, and ultimately your end customer or your user is the judge of what's considered innovation. So start small with an idea, and it's okay if your first product launch doesn't include every single feature that you think is necessary to really meet the vision. That's why we work in an agile fashion, and we continue to iterate and innovate as we move. So the most important thing is to provide something to your users so they can begin to test and experience it as quickly as possible, because that feedback is going to be honestly the most valuable feedback that you have in this process. All right, so let's talk briefly about successful innovation teams. So what do product teams that are set up for innovation look like? Some of these words might look familiar to you based on the type of org you work in. Some might look a little familiar, or you use a different word for it. But the whole point is that these are roles that are discrete and have distinct responsibilities, but also work together in pursuit of a common outcome. So in the center here, we have our product owner. Sometimes people might call it a digital product lead. So this is sort of the glue or the quarterback of the team, who's working closely with all of the different roles around this circle to bring an idea to life. You probably don't have all of these people working at the exact same moment on the problem. And as you go through phases, certain roles may come in and out. But this is, I would say, in general, the types of folks that are successful for digital product innovation. And as you move through those phases, no matter who you are or what the title of or role of the humans are on this screen, having a strong sense of ownership of what this team is doing and why is going to keep us oriented in the right place. So product teams, I would say the team members, based on their discipline and area of expertise, are going to naturally gravitate towards ownership of different priorities, but we are all in pursuit of that product idea that we're moving forward together. All right, so ideation is pretty much day one, and we've talked a little bit about what it takes to drive something forward, but I also want to talk about these guiding principles that team that I showed on the previous slide really orients around. So we need to be sure that when we are coming up with an idea, we are answering around desirability. So does the user want this? What is the value prop? Does this actually solve a real problem that exists? Viability. So from the business side, does this align with leadership's intent? Do we have a product vision? Can this even generate revenue if that's one of the requirements for this successful product? Can our company support it with the right business capabilities in place? Feasibility. So is it possible to do with our existing technology? What do we need to add, or what do we need to augment or improve? Do we understand how hard or easy it is to build something? Have we done something similar in the past? What lessons learned came from that? And what needs to happen to make this possible? So there's no right or wrong answer as you go through those questions, but I think that shared ownership is really where ideal product lies, in the center of these three bubbles. And this is something that our team always comes back to when we are moving forward across phases. So if you want to start today, my advice is start small. So define your vision. What is your North Star? Your objectives and measurable results are going to help you stay on track to meet that. Get to know your customer, and not just one time, but engage in continuous discovery and consider your customer or end user to actually be a partner in the work that you do. So what they're doing today with your product, what are their hopes or dreams or frustration? Be obsessed about that. Think about the structure of your teams or your working groups and get your team on the same page again around that vision. I have a saying, which is everyone draws. And there is something that is so powerful about when we stop talking and we actually do our best to illustrate what we are trying to do for our users. It is the great equalizer. There are a lot of people who are visual designers that actually aren't that great at drawing with their hands, believe it or not. And there are people who are product managers that have surprised me with their skills. But I think that this is amazing when we also co-create with our clients. I've seen everyone from, military leaders, and I have seen people that have been in the workforce for 2 years in rooms drawing. And it is absolutely the best way, I think, for everyone to just start to express their idea from the ground up. Keep in mind that innovation can come from anywhere and from anyone. And so if you want to drive that, be sure to make space for it. So hold forums, shamelessly gather feedback on your product, always be asking why. And when there's frustration for a user or someone says something along the lines of like, well, this is the way it's always been done here, that is the opportunity to start to hone in on. And then lastly, reframe the definition of your team's success. So when we put the focus on the results that we want to drive, when we put our focus on meeting a deadline, that is an output, but when we focus on the results that we're trying to drive with what we put into the market, that is a team that is solving for outcomes. So yes, we are all responsible for outputs. We all need to do things when we say that they need to be done. But when you leave the session today, test yourself, and whatever you're working on, ask yourself, what is the outcome that I am trying to drive? Not just when it is due, but what is it that I am trying to actually achieve? And set these outcomes and talk about it openly with your teams. And you'll find, I believe, that the people begin to talk about their work and what they're doing, and they'll feel a connection to the objectives when they understand the outcomes quite a bit differently. So I think that outcomes and an outcome-oriented mindset truly creates space for innovation. We have one final poll that I think we're going to set up now. So of these 4 takeaway tips that I've given, which of these do you feel drawn to getting started with right away? Neck and neck here. All right, we can go ahead. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so identifying outputs that can be reframed as desired outcomes. I think that's fantastic. Next up, we've got, if we're in ranked order, crafting an innovation goal tied to your org goals, talking to your users, and reframing your team structures. All right, thank you so much for participating in the polls. I think it's a really fun way to kind of hear what's resonating or kicking around in your heads as I've been talking. Don't you wish I had been drawing a little bit more? So thank you for your time. I really hope that you enjoyed learning about Nerdery's definition of innovation and how we are solving these problems for our clients today. I do believe that we have the chat or the Q&A open. So if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and add them to the chat, and Marissa will help me work through those with the time we have remaining. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kendall, for sharing. So we covered a lot of ground on innovation. I was scribbling down notes and I'm taking a lot away and how it applies to my work. We did get a couple of questions while you were talking, but want to just remind those that are on the call that now is a good time to add your questions. You can either use the Q&A button or the chat feature. But we had a question come in, and I believe the person is asking, how can you check if your team is in alignment on what needs to be innovated?
Ooh. Okay, how much time do we have? I have so many thoughts. Okay. So I think that there are a couple of ways, I think, to work through structured thinking together. So we like to talk about, in design thinking, there's a formula for problem statements. And when you have everybody go heads down and use this structure, it's really prescriptive on kind of like a Mad Libs. When you work through it that way and everybody has to write down what they think the problem statement is, you're going to be able to start clustering and saying, all right, these 5 people maybe used slightly different words, but they wrote the same thing. Here are a couple outliers. It doesn't mean that they are not problems, but if you don't orient on what the problem is that everyone's solving, you can't be moving into ideation, because then everyone's going to be, I don't know, solving something different. So starting with a problem statement activity, and we use this structure that kind of says this pain point or frustration makes X user. So be clear about who the primary user is that you're talking about. Feel X, so frustrated, pain point, whatever that is. And then it really helps, I would say, put everyone on the same page. And we also use a structure that brings in the human emotion as well, because I think that's a big part of the subtext about what a problem is. So is someone apathetic that it takes them a little longer and a couple of extra clicks, or are we actually seeing drop-off rates? So bringing in analytics, bringing in user insights as well are going to help, I think, reframe a problem statement activity into something that I think can actually be really powerful for your team. And it doesn't have to be something that takes a whole day. Like, you can kind of do it iteratively as well. And then once you have all those problems laid out, now you can start prioritizing of what your team thinks is the biggest problem to solve and why.
Oh, that's great advice. Thank you, Kendall. Another question came in, guest asking, Andrew Odekert, formerly of 3M, has done research in this area with a paper on T-shaped innovation. Is the T-shaped innovation model something that Nerdery relies on at all?
I am not familiar with that, but you can bet I'm going to Google that as soon as we leave this session.
I was doing that as well after the question. Another question just popped in. You referenced design thinking. How else does design thinking overlay with the innovation process?
I think, to me, the acute focus on solving for user needs, pain points, and problems, and then bringing I've used the word cross-discipline or cross-functional team together to solve it. I think those are, to me, one and the same. And so the process that you work through with defining the problem before you actually start to solution or identify the opportunities, like that to me is a process that fits really well into innovation, because you can't solve for something unless you know what you're solving for. So I think that they're intrinsically tied.
Absolutely. I have a question for you, which is, I'm curious to hear more about how organizations can prioritize innovation, particularly in terms of resource allocation or their decision-making process.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to having alignment on, first of all, what the organization's objectives are. So if you have something that you're mapping against and you have this innovative idea that's going to map to a goal that's already been set, that's one way that organizations that I think have a a more robust planning process can still make space for it. It's not prescriptive when you're in strategic planning of how necessarily every single thing is going to get done, but it's really what is the outcome we want to try to impact further down the road. And then that space of how to get there is where innovation, I think, works pretty nicely inside of that.
That's great. Well, Kendal, I think we'll cut it off there. I know you have one more slide that has information about how to connect with Nerdery.
Yes. Yep, I'll pop that up. But yeah, any other questions, please reach out and I'd love to chat more. So
thank you again, Kendal, and thank you to Nerdery for your time and your expertise. We'll be sharing the recording out with all registrants so you can catch it again, share it with your team, and so you can start implementing some of the ideas that Kendal shared. And just another reminder, we've got another session coming up with Nerdery in May. I will be sharing the link to register for that. And then just a thank you again to everybody who joined us today for this very valuable session. Have a great day.
thanks, folks. It's been a pleasure.